Good evening. I hope you are all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Daf Lamed Hey. We're going to end at the parak on Lamed Vav Amid Aleph, which is a nice ending point, and that then will give us the opportunity to start with a clean parak on Shabbos. We will get on Shabbos as far as Mincha will allow us to get, and that is pretty much it. Where are we starting from? We're starting from a Mishnah toward the bottom on Lamed Dal and Amid Beis. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Unlike yesterday's Gemara, which was very difficult, tonight's Gemara is normal. It's not going to last, but it's normal. So let us learn together, starting with this new Mishnah. The Mishnah opens at the bottom of Lamed Dal and Amid Beis as follows. Yesh chayev al ma'isa shoro upater al ma'isa atzmo. There are times that you can do an action where you will be held accountable for what your shor does. Upater al ma'isa atzmo, and when you yourself do that action, you will be pater. And pater al ma'isa shor b'chayev al ma'isa atzmo. And sometimes your animal can do an action and you'll be pater. But if you were to do that same action, you would be chayev. Ketzad. What are the examples where we find this quirk, this weird reality that if your animal does X, it would have a different din than when you do X? The Gemara says, Ketzad, shoro shebiesh pater, behu shebiesh chayev. If a shor does something that embarrasses you, right? Let's say you've probably all seen like a video clip where you get like a horse kick backwards in the face and everybody's laughing at you. The horse embarrassed you, so the horse is pater. The horse doesn't know what he's doing. He's a horse. However, if you were to do a ma'isa that was mevayesh someone, if you do something that embarrasses someone, of course, you'll be held accountable. Shoro, if your animal, shesime es ein avdo v'hipil es shino, pater. If my shor damages my eved in a way that he would otherwise have gone free had I done the damage. So if the animal does it, pater, the person doesn't go free. But if I did that, then the animal does go free. Shoro, if my animal was shechavel be'aviv u've'imo chayev, if my animal causes damage to my father or my mother, I will be held accountable for those damages. However, pater. If I physically damage and bruise my father or my mother, I'd be pater, because that's not good, because you have a bigger chiyuv coming, which is that you have to die now. Because we have a din here of kamle b'derabamine. So whatever the damages are that you do, you are not going to pay, but you're much more chayev than it would have been in the case of the animal. And last but not least, and this is going to cover some of our conversation today. Shoro shehidlik es hagadish b'Shabbos chayev. If my animal, my shor, lights a fire on Shabbos and causes damage, I, as the owner of that shore, would be held accountable. However, if I light a fire and cause damage, I will be pater on those damages because of kamle b'derabamine. I am chayiv misa in that case scenario because I'm not allowed to light a fire. If I light a fire, I'm chayiv misa and therefore pater midine tashlumin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nihya b'dvaro. The Gemara opens as follows. We're 6-7 lines from the bottom on Lamed Dal and Amid Beis. Tani Rabbi Abahu kamed Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Abahu quotes a brisa, and he does so in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Kol ha'mekalkel in Peturin. If ever on Shabbos a person does a ma'isa kilkul, they do a destructive act. In general, they're pater. Chutz michovel umavir, except for a case scenario of chovel where I damage someone. Umavir, when I light a fire. Amar le, Rabbi Yochanan says to Rabbi Abo, Hok tani libra, go teach your Mishnah outside. Namely, you don't know what you're talking about. Chovel umavir eno Mishnah. When you said your din, that chovel and mavir are going to be chayev no matter what, that they're going to be chayev no matter what, even without intent, that is not correct, says Rabbi Yochanan. V'im tim salomar Mishnah. And even if you want to say that Mishnah, that it is the din, we would have to say that chovel b'tzarach lekalbo, when I damage an animal or a person, I might do so for the sake of giving the blood to the dog, which was something that was done back in the day. And mavir b'tzarach le'afaro. And if I'm going to burn something, it must be that I need the ashes. It can't be that in a vacuum, if I'm mekalkel with chovel or with mavir, that I'm chayev no matter what. We need to have some context. The Gemara has a kasha against Rabbi Yochanan. Let's remember Rabbi Yochanan's shita. Rabbi Yochanan was of the opinion that Rabbi Abba was wrong, that the Bryce of Rabbi Abba was wrong. And Rabbi Abba had said that Chovel and Mavir would be Chayavin even if it was Mekalkel. Let's analyze. Tanan, we have a Mishnah. Shoro Shehidikes HaGodesh B'Shabbos Chayv. This is our Mishnah. V'hu Shehidikes HaGodesh B'Shabbos Pater. So what do we see in our Mishnah? We see that a shore that causes damage on Shabbos by lighting a fire, I, as the owner, am responsible for the damages. But if I were to have done the same, because of Kamle B'Derabamine, because I am a Yid and I'm not allowed to light a fire, so therefore there's a chiyuv misa for me, and therefore I'm patur from Tashlumin. So says the Gemara. Therefore, what? The Katani. What did we learn in our brisa? The Katani who dumya the shoro. It seems that the man is dome to a shore. And that we'll see that there's a comparison to be made here. Mashoro de lo kabaile, just like a shore, he has no need for ashes. So too, afhu nami de lo kabaile. Perhaps when there's mavir, he too, even the individual, top of Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, doesn't need the ashes, and still the katani putter. We still see that you're putter, namely you're putter because of kamle b'derabamine. A little bit of a complexity, so I'm going to say this again. When we say putter over here, that means that you're patur from the tashlumin, but you're chayiv misa because you lit a fire. But you didn't need the ashes. It was mavir, not for the ashes. So maybe Rav Yochanan is wrong. So we say you're patur from tashlumin because your life is on the line because you violated an isser, but that was even without wanting the ashes. So therefore, perhaps Rav Yochanan, who said no, that the only way that mavir is going to be usser is with ashes when there's something that you're gaining from it. Perhaps Rav Yochanan is wrong. Says the Gemara, you've misunderstood. Lo, instead of saying that we learned something from the man from the shore, it's the other way. Lo, shoro dumya dide. The shore has a similarity to the man. And I'm just saying right now, this is crazy. Okay, just like before we get there, this is not normal. The Gemara says, Mahu de kabaile. Just like when a man lights a fire, he can do so with intent for ashes. Af shoro de kabaile. The shore also wanted there to be ashes. Says the Gemara, shoro heiche mishkachasla. What is a case scenario where a shore wakes up in the morning and says, you know what? I really could use some ashes. And the Gemara responds and entertains this possibility. Bishor pikeach. It's a very smart shore. She'olso lo nishicha begapo. It has a bite on its back from another animal. And of course, he knows the finest of medical treatments, that ash is very good for bites. So the kabay lemikle, the igandar bekutma. He wants to burn something, the shore. We're not talking about a person. The shore wants to burn something in order to get ashes. And the ingidar bekutma, the animal is going to roll around in the ashes in order to have it cover the gaps of the bite on his back. I'm sorry, I've never heard of such a thing. You want to tell me that there's a one-step thing that a cow might know how to do? Berry tastes good, me eat berry. I'm okay with that. This is a two-step process. I have a bite on my back. The medicine that I need requires first burning something and rolling around. That's a regimen already. That's something that only higher level thinking. What? I mean, he's really smart. He's really smart. He actually has an IQ. It's not like regular, multiple. Yet this is what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, "Uminoyad inan." How would we ever know that the shore was thinking about this? So says the Gemara, that part's easy. Dilabasar dekalye. After he burns what he burns, kamigdanar bikutma. We see him rolling around. Obviously, he had a plan. So we have this cow, and he takes a match and he brings it over to the shed, and he burns the shed down. And after all the embers cool down, he rolls around in the sand, in the ashes to cover his back. Now we know that he's a short pecan. It's Hanukkah and not Purim. Definitely not Purim. It should be. So says the Gemara. Asks the Gemara, I mean, really, Umi ika ki hayavna? Do we have such cows that, honestly, some of them could navigate Harvard at this point? They're really pretty bright animals. The Gemara says, there are animals that are so bright. Dahu Torah, there was a shore, Dahaba Bei Rav Papa. Dahaba Kaiven Le Chinche. His teeth were hurting him. Kaiven from the word Ke'ev. And Chinche in the Gemara is teeth. Ayel. Upaske Lenaziasa. He opened up the barrel of wine. Vishase Shechra. He drank the wine. The Issi. Okay, a lot of comments. First of all, very impressive. Second of all, since when is beer a cure for anything? How did this cure his toothache? A numbing agent? A short-term numbing agent. Like some Moels might do with a gauze pad and wine. What? Right. Right, that's also probably true. But I would also say I think the burning of something to create ashes and rolling around in it is more sophisticated than drinking beer. So like even this comparison of saying, yeah, we have a short pikeach, I'm a little thrown by the comparison. Yeah. What? That's terrifying. And it also halachically is massive. Because if our intention matters of shogeg and mezid sometimes, why then wouldn't an animal's intentions matter? Okay, says the Gemara 10 lines down. Amru Rabbanon Kame Durapapa. Mi matis amris shoro dum yadide. We said on the second line of this page that the shor is dome to the person. But how can we say that? There's a scenario in our Mishnah that doesn't allow for this. V'ha katani shoro shebiyesh pater v'hu shebiyesh chayev. And if shoro is dum yudidei, niskabin levayish hechi mishkachasla. How can we have a case scenario where an animal is intending to embarrass someone? Now, if we don't read the next words and we guessed, based on our previous Gemara, we would have assumed that the shor was like a stand-up comedian. But here the Gemara says no. While it might be the case that the animal can burn something to create ash to roll around in it to heal something, it is not the case with busha. Kigon sheniskavin lahazik. The animal doesn't know how to be mavayish someone, and really what's happening is that all he wants to do is injure someone. Amar mar niskavin lahazik afal pisha lo niskavin lavayish. That if an animal was only intending to damage, and in the end it ended up embarrassing someone, the halacha is that the master is in fact obligated to pay through the damage. If the damage was a busha, of course the cow doesn't have intent. But I shouldn't say of course. The cow doesn't have intent for the busha, but he had intent to injure, therefore we have to pay for busha. All of this is approach number 1 in the Gemara, and now let's see approach number 2. We had asked a question on Rav Yochanan on the bottom of Lamed Daled Amid Beis. The Gemara says about halfway down, Rava Amar must nisim b'shogeg. Rava says that our whole Mishnah on Lamed Daled Amid Beis is talking about b'shogeg, and the case of Rav Yochanan that we quoted, the case of Rabbi Abba and Rav Yochanan that we quoted at the open of the Gemara, is not talking about b'shogeg. We know that because we're talking about kamle b'derabba mineh, which means that there's a chiyuv misa. So Rav Yochanan's talking about a din deoraisa, a chiyuv misa. And the Mishnah is only talking about a shogeg. Uchedetana de bechizkia, detana de bechizkia. Makeh adam umakeh behema. Ma makeh behema, when I damage an animal, the following many things are true. Lo chilakta, there's no distinction ba bein shogeg bein mezid, between my damaging the animal, b'shogeg, or damaging the animal b'mezid, bein miskavin l'she'ein miskavin, with intent or without intent, bein derech yirida, bein derech aliyah, whether or not I damage the animal on my downswing or on my upswing, either one. And it's also not trying to be lepotra mimamon l'chayev mamon. I have to pay money. Af make adam. The same is true with hitting a person, says the Gemara. Lo tachlog bein lo tachlog bo. We should not make distinctions when I damage another person. Ben shogeg lemezid, ben miskavin l'shein miskavin, ben derech yirida l'derech aliyah l'chayev mamon elo lepotra mimamon. All of this is going to pater the person. So amru le rabbanan le Rava. The rabbi said to Rava, Mi matis mukmas la b'shogeg. How can it be that we're talking about a case in our Mishnah that's b'shogeg? After all, this brisa over here from Tana de Bechizkia doesn't distinguish between shogeg and mezid. So how can you in our Mishnah say our Mishnah is shogeg Rabbi Abo and Rabbi Yochanan are b'mezid. That's not true. Our Mishnah can't be b'shogeg. After all, v'hamipnei she nidon b'nafsho ktani. We see that our Mishnah is talking about a case of kamle b'derabba minei. That obviously means it isn't shogeg. Says the Gemara, hachi kamar. This is the right way to understand. Kevan de b'mezid nidon b'nafsho. Since in a case where had it been that he did so intentionally, he would be mischayeh b'nafsho. V'hechi dami dekaboy la'afaro. That would be a case where we needed the ashes. Therefore, hashta b'shogeg pater. Therefore, even in a case of shogeg, you're going to be pater. This is how the Gemara explains the case of our Mishnah with Rav Yochanan, and that brings us to a new Mishnah. This Mishnah is going to carry the day and will take us to the end of the parak. Let us dive in. Says the Mishnah, Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the bottom. Shor shahaya rodev achar shor acher v'huza. We have shore number 1 and shore number 2. The Mazik shore and the Nizak shore. They're just two of them are frolicking. Right now, they're both tam. Nobody did anything wrong. And they turn the corner. No one can see them anymore. And then they say, Phil, your animal is messing around. Rabbi Yitz, your animal, they're fighting with each other. And we go there. We don't see what happened. No Nest cameras. But we see that my animal is damaged on the ground. So what's the din? Do we assume that Yitz's animal damaged my animal? Yes or no? Ze omer shorcha hizik. I argue to Yitz that your animal hurt mine. Ze omer low key. That's not correct. Ela b'sela laka. Maybe somebody dropped a rock on your animal, and how do you know that it's my animal? You cannot hold me accountable. Says the Gemara, you're correct. Hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. Even though there is an impression of what might have happened, I could presume that it was his animal. They were fighting. But because we didn't see the actual damage, so therefore I cannot hold Yitz responsible for paying me back for my animal, because perhaps, as he argued, it was a rock and it wasn't your animal. And therefore, Hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. Let's just describe the terminology. Hamotzi mechavero olav haraya is a term we find throughout Shas. That when when anyone is trying to extract money from another person, then they have to bring a proof. You can't just make an assumption. There has to be a strong factual basis for the collection of funds. We'll soon see in the Gemara that this is not agreed to by everyone, in particular by Sumchus. Case number 2 in the Mishnah. Hayu shnayim rodfin. Let's say 2 animals were chasing my animal, achar echad. So we have Yitz's animal, and they were owned by 2 people. So we have Yitz's animal, we have Michael's animal, and they are chasing my animal. Ze omer shorcha hizik, v'ze omer shorcha hizik. So the 2 of you are arguing who injured my animal. Yitz says it's Michael's animal that injured Phil's animal. Michael says it's Yitz's animal because they're both trying to get out of being held accountable. Turning to the top of Lamed Hey Amud Beis, Shnehem Piturim, the Tarvayu, Rashi says the Tarvayu Madchile. It seems to be that they both agree that it was one of their animals. Maybe there was an indicator as such. Nevertheless, the Gemara says that they're both pater. Here we don't say Hamotzi mechaver olav haraya. We assume that there is guilt. Third case in the Mishnah, we are on the very top. No, because everyone's pater. Well, both of your animals are healthy. You're just arguing which of your animals damaged my animal. That's not what the Mishnah is saying. He's blaming you, and I didn't blame anybody. Yeah. Correct. But it's a bit of an odd case because neither of you are trying to be motzi from either of you. It's not me. I'm not involved. It's not really hamotzi mechavero. It's you 2 are arguing. I'm standing on the side watching you banter as you both try to wriggle out of who's responsible. So the Mishnah says, I hear what you're saying. It could be that there's some truth in that because then the result would be that I get the money. Could be, I don't know. We might have to look in the Rishonim for that. Top line. Im hayushneim shal ish echad. However, if let's say both animals belong to Yitz, the 2 animals that were chasing, and my animal was injured, so then shneim chayavim. So then the double animal, you are accountable. In other words, the Gemara asks that exact question on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. We're going to ask that before the end of the day. You've read one legal brief too many and edited. You got it down. Good deal. Next case, second line. Haya echad gadol ve'echad katan. If one animal was larger and one animal was smaller, what's the nizak going to say? Hanizak Omer, it was the gadol that was hizi. Why? Because he collects chatzi. He collects half of the animal that did the damaging. The mazik Omer, no, loki. Elakatan hizik. No, it was the small animal because he doesn't want to be held more accountable. What about echad tam ve'echad muad? You can already see where the Gemara is going. Hanizak Omer muad hizik, because then he gets nezek shalim. V'hamazik Omer loki. That's not correct. Ela tam hizik, because then he only has to pay chati nezek. In these cases, hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. In these cases, we employ the halachic principle that I cannot extract anything from either of you without a raya. Another case, hayu hanizakin shnayim. The damaged animals were two, namely my animals that got hurt. There were two of them. Echad gadol ve'echad katan. I have two animals. I have a 1,000-pound cow and a 500-pound cow. The hamazikin, the animals that were chasing my two animals, were also shnayim. There were two of those. Echad gadol ve'echad katan. So the Gemara says, Hanizak Omer, I might want to argue in the following way. Gadol hizik esa gadol ve'katan esa katan. V'hamazik Omer loki ela katan esa gadol ve'gadol esa katan. Each one leveraging their halachic positioning to make sure that they collect the most from the perspective of the nizak, or spend the less from the perspective of the mazik. And next, echad tam ve'echad muad. We're 12 lines down on Lamed Hey Amud Beis. If one of the animals is tam and one is muad, then hanizak Omer muad hizik esad gadol. Oh, your animal, which is a muad, hurt my big animal, and that is why, says the Gemara, that is why I want to be able to make a mint on the deal, because my gadol animal and chatzi nezek, that to me is a good deal. So that's what the nizak says. V'hamazik Omer loki elatam es hagadol umuad es hakatan, because that way the mazik is able to save a little bit more money. Here too, hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. Rabbi Yitzhak, I'm thinking about your question more. It's the only case in the Mishnah that's patur. I mean, they're all patur because of hamotzi mechavero, but the language is different. So I'm like thinking, well, the cases are just, they're iterations of the same. They're so similar. The permutations of the cases are very similar. I'm wondering if that's also hamotzi mechavero. If it is, why didn't it say hamotzi mechavero? If it isn't, I could understand why, because it's not really me making a claim. It's the two of you fighting with each other, but thinking about it more. Okay, that brings us to the Gemara. The Gemara now has a big shas machlokes. We spoke about this idea called hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. You cannot extract money from me without a proof. But there's another halachic principle called mamon hamutal b'safek cholket. That when we don't know what to do with money, we split 50-50. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, what we see from our Mishnah is Zoso Meres, Cholkin alav chaverov al sumchus. That our Mishnah is the polar opposite of the Shita of Sumchus. The Amar, Mamon Hamutal b'safek Cholkin. Now let's just think back to the various cases of our Mishnah. What would Sumchus have said? Oh, I don't know if it was this. I don't know if it was that. Was it your... Let's go back to the first case. Maybe it was your animal. Maybe it wasn't. Whenever there's a suffix in Mamon, Sumcha says 50-50. Our Mishnah says no payments until there's a proof. So Tachlis, when you say Amotzi mechaver olav haraya, how much money changes hands? 0. When you say Mamon Amutal b'safek cholken, how much money changes hands? 50%. Very big halachic nafkaminas, right? So that's what the Gemara presents. That our Mishnah is not Sumchus. Sumchus disagrees with our Mishnah, and he would instead hold that Mamon Hamutal b'safek cholken. Amar le Rabbi Abba bar Mama le Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Amar Sumchus afilu bari bari. When does Sumchus say the din of Mamon Hamutal b'safek cholken? Is it in a case where we have two baris? Let's say that I am bari that you owe me $1,000, and you're bari that I don't owe you $1,000. Those are two baris, very strong claims. The Gemara says, Amar le, yes. Omar Sumchus afilu bari bari. In other words, we're not talking about two cases of shemas. I'm not sure, I don't remember, and you say, maybe you paid me back, I'm not sure. That's not the only time we apply Mamon Hamutal b'safek cholken according to Sumchus. We apply it even when my feet are deeply planted. I definitely don't owe you $1,000. And you say, you definitely owe me $1,000. What would Sumcha say? Bari v'bari. Two strong claims. A bari claim is definite. A shema claim is, I'm not so sure. So I'm 1,000% sure in my head. You're 1,000% sure in your head. How do we know that he would say because, says the Gemara, Sumchas disagrees with our whole Mishnah. And what did our Mishnah say? Demas nisin bebari barihu. How do we know that our Mishnah is a case of bari and bari? Look at the dialogue. Dikatani ze omer shorcha hizik v'ze omer loki. This is the first case of the Mishnah. In the first case of the Mishnah, I went over to Yitz and said, look at my animal. He's injured. Obviously, your animal's guilty. And I'm a bari. And then Rabbi Yitz says, no, maybe it was a rock. Maybe it wasn't me. And says the Gemara, v'ze omer loki, and Rashi says a third of the way down, the language of loki mashma de pshita le de beselalaka. According to Rabbi Yitz, it's pashut that the damage was done by a rock. He's not emotionally venting. He thinks it's the rock. It's not lying. Let's just be clear. Your passion doesn't make you a bari. Information makes you a bari. This is not the internet. Things matter. So in halachic terms, if you're going to say, I'm certain it was a rock, I'm looking at the damage, it's in the shape of the rock. You argue, oh, maybe it's in the shape of the horn. It's two bari claims. Two for sure. Then in that case, Maman Amuta B'Safek is Cholkin. And the reason we know that that's the case is because our Mishnah says that case is, this is a little subtle, our Mishnah says that's the case of a Motzi Mechavero. By definition, Sumchas argues, which means that he holds Bari V'Bari. Halfway down on Lamed Hamid Beis, the Gemara says, Maski Flara Papa, well, Midaresha Bari Ubari. If you're saying that the first case in our Mishnah is a case of two definite claims, where I say to Yitz, your animal definitely injured me, a strong Bari claim. And he says back to me, no way. What happened was that your animal was killed by a rock. If that's true, then Seifa Nami, Bari Ubari. That would then imply that the Seifa, one of the latter cases in our Mishnah, is also a case of two very strong claims. What is that case? Ema Seifa. Haya echad gadol ve'echad katan. Ze omer gadol hizik, umazik omer, nizak omer, gadol hizik, umazik omer loki ela katan hizik. And also as well, the case of echad tam ve'echad muad. Nizak omer muad hizik, ve'hamazik omer loki ela tam hizik, hamotzi mechabel varaya. So there, that's the sheets of our Mishnah. What would we seem to hold in our case with Sumchos? That same case, he would seem to hold that Maman Amut Basavik is Cholkit. Let's make a diuk from our Mishnah. What about lo maisi raya? Let's say you and I have an argument. I say your muad animal damaged me, and you say, no, it wasn't my muad, it was my tam. What happens if I'm not able to bring a raya? Shakil kida amar mazik. The Gemara says without a raya, it implies that you would be able to collect whatever money you can get his hands on, right? So if I say to you, where you have two animals, Yitz, your animal that was a muad injured my animal, I want nezek shalim. And Yitz says back to me, no, it was a tam, and I only owe you chatzi nezek. But I don't have a proof. So the Gemara makes a deal that without a proof, what do? I'll take whatever Rabbi Yitz is offering. He's offering chatzi nezek. Okay, I'll take it. I mean, whatever. I'll minimize my losses. I'll take whatever I can, and I'll cut my gains. What am I supposed to do? I'll take whatever I can get. Says the Gemara, if that's true, that when I have an argument with Rabbi Yitz and I can't find a raya, that I collect money in the form of the chatzi nezek that's available to me, Neima, 2/3 of the way down on Lamed Hamid Beis, perhaps we should say that Tehave Tiyufta de Rabba Bar Nosson. What does Rabba Bar Nosson hold? The Amar, he says, Ta'anu chitim v'hodelo b'sa'orim pater. If I claim that Yitz owes me wheat, and he says, no, I don't, I only owe you barley, and barley's cheaper, the halacha is that you're pater from everything. I don't collect anything. I wasn't owed se'orim. I didn't claim se'orim. What I claimed was chitim. Says the Gemara, Ella, it must be that our Mishnah is b'bari v'shema. Our Mishnah has to be a case of bari v'shema, because if it's bari v'bari, then how can I take your money? How can I take your chatzi nezek dollars? I don't even think that's true. I think that the muad killed my animal. So it doesn't make any sense. It has to be that it's a case of bari v'shema. Because if it's bari v'bari, it doesn't make sense for me to take what Rabbi Yitzchak is offering in the Chatzi Nezek side of things. That's not even what I think happened. Doesn't make any sense. It says the Gemara, Ela must be bari v'shema, and Dika Amar bari man, Dika Amar shema man. Who is the bari claim, and who is the shema claim? Inema, if we want to say, and we're 3/4 of the way down to Kamar Nizak Bari, that my claim as the Nizak, I'm claiming that Yitz's muad animal was the one who caused damage. The Kamar Mazik Shema, and therefore Yitz's claim as the Mazik was a Shema. Akati, I could still argue, Lema Tavet Yufta de Rabbi Bar Nosson. I still could reject the Shita of Rabbi Bar Nosson with this if I take any money at all. Ella, it must be the Ka'amar Nizak Shema. It must be that my claim that Rabbi Yitz's muad animal hurt me was a Shema, Umazik Bari, and your claim that it was a Tam is the claim of Bari. And therefore it must be Resha Nizak, Resha Nami Nizak Shema, Umazik Bari. That would then mean if the Seifa is where we have one person claiming Shema and one person claiming Bari, if that's the only way to understand the Seifa, then we're going against our assumption from earlier where we thought that both claims in the ratio were a bari. We said the first case was bari v'bari, but now we're saying the seifa has to be bari v'shema, so the ratio now has to be bari v'shema. The Omar Sumchus afilu beha. Would Sumchus say in a case of bari v'shema the isrich lashminon delo? You're going to tell me in that case? Of course, in a case of bari v'shema, Sumchus is not going to say Mama Namuta B'Savik Cholkin. That doesn't make sense. If I'm a bari and you're a shema, then pay up. I don't need a halachic principle of Mama Namuta B'Savik Cholkin. There's no way that Sumchus would ever say that. So now we're stuck. We don't know how to understand our Mishnah. We initially thought our ratio was bari v'bari, but the seifa had to be bari v'shema. So if the seifa is bari v'shema, then the ratio is bari v'shema. But if the ratio is bari v'shema, then what's Sumchus talking about, Bichlal? The Gemara says 2 lines into the wide lines, 12 lines from the bottom of Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Lo, you've misunderstood. Seifa Nizak Shema Umazik Bari. Reisha Nizak Bari Umazik Shema. In the Seifa, in the case where I was dealing with Yitz and his 2 animals, in that case, I, the Nizak, am making a Shema claim that I'm pretty sure that Yitz's muad animal damaged my animal. But Yitz has a mazik claim, has a bari claim. Yitz has the mazik has a bari claim that it was only the tam. And the Reisha, where I was dealing with just one animal, my animal, and Yitz's animal. I said Yitz's animal was guilty, and Yitz said it was a rock. There, Reisha Nizak bari, I was right. I made the real claim, and he was just making up an answer about a rock. That's fine that maybe you found an answer. That's great, but they're still not the same because the Reisha was where the Nizak was a bari and the Mazik was a Shema, and it was the reverse in the Seifa. So to this, the Gemara says, Amri, bari v'shema, Shema v'bari, chad milsahi. If the Reisha and Seifa are both talking about cases of bari v'shema, but in one case the bari is the Nizak, and the mazik is the shema, and in the next case they're reversed. Same kind of sugya. They don't have to be apples to apples. It's okay. That's fine. That's chada milsahi. However, bari ubari, shema ubari, that's trei milenin. You cannot have a brisa where the reisha and the seifa conflict in the following way, where the reisha is bari v'bari and the seifa is bari v'shema. That's oil and water. That does not work. That is how the Gemara concludes that the Reisha is talking about where the Nizak was a bari and the Shema was and the Mazik was a Shema, and the Seifa was talking about where the Nizak was a Shema and the Mazik was a bari. Let's now analyze the case that we brought up as a raya to something that we learned. Gufa, 8-9 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar Rabba bar Reb Nosson, Ta'anu chitim. If I claim from Reb Yitz that he owes me wheat, behold the lo b'se'orim, and he says, nope, not true, but I do owe you barley. So then, pater. The halacha is pater. My kamash malan. Why did I need his line in the first place? I already have precedence for this halacha. Tanina. Not only do I have precedence, but I have precedence from a Tanaic source. What does it say? Pater. Kasha. I don't need your extra comment. Save your breath. Save the ink. Why did you say the same exact thing that we have in a brisa? The Gemara says because Ime Hasam, if I would have only had one source, Hava amina pater midmei chitin v'chayiv b'dmei seorin. I might have thought that if I am owed seorim and Yitz says you're only owed barley, because Yitz is giving me the financial equivalent of at least some of what I know I deserve, at least I should collect the seorim. Therefore, says the Gemara, Kamash Malan, Dipater legamre. No, you collect nothing. What was mechadish with the din of Rabbi Bar Nasan is he added on to the brisa. The brisa may have left me thinking that Rabbi Yitz should give me the seorim because at the very least he owes me that. Kamash Malan, the line of Rabbi Bar Nasan, that no, you owe me nothing. I didn't claim seorim. I claimed chitin. You said no, and I don't have a proof. We're done. And I'm out of money unless I can provide a proof. That's a different case now. Because that's true, because then of course you'd have to pay. But here I'm saying wheat, he's saying, I don't owe you wheat, but I do owe you barley. I'm like, no, you don't owe me barley. I guess I'll take it. Right, correct. That you forfeited anyways. The brisa doesn't allow that person to pay it. The money never changes hands. That is the case. That's why he's putter.
What's the finish that's on?
It's not true.
He's saying, he's saying, only this, right? The other guy's admitting, yes, I do owe you something, but there's a different thing. So that's what. Similar to
no, the claim in the Resha is your animal hurt my animal, you owe me money, and you just deny it. That's all that happened. You say no, it was a rock. You deny it. In this case, you're completely disagreeing with the whole premise. I'm saying you owe me wheat. You're saying you're out of your mind. We never traded in wheat. But don't you remember about the barley? I owe you barley. The cases are not identical. I hope my chiluk is correct. The cases are not quite identical. Also, let's remember that the line of Hamotzi Mecherah Levarai was in our Mishnah like 5 times. We really have to look in the Rishonim. What is every case nuancing? Because you're right. The thrust of your question is correct. What's the chiddush here? And I think here, the pashtus, the chiddush would be that it's not a regular claim of you owe me money versus no, I don't. Because here, I'm saying you owe me money, and you're saying I actually do owe you money, but not what you think. It's not seorim, but it's not chitim, but it's seorim. Tanan, the Gemara has a question, 6 lines from the bottom. We had spoken about this case, and this was where we said in the Mishnah that I have 2 animals who are being chased. Echad gadol ve'echad katan v'chulei. What would happen over there? Halom maisi raya. According to our Mishnah, what if there was no raya? Shakil kid'amar mazik. The diuk would be that I would take what I'm being offered, and what I'm being offered is that Yitz would say that his tam damaged my animal, instead of me saying that the bari damaged my animal. Amai? Why would we allow this diuk to exist? Didn't we just learn chitinu seorim ninhu? Didn't we learn that in the case of wheat and barley, that you don't even get the barley? So why in our Mishnah do you get the lower payment that the mazik has admitted to? Says the Gemara, Ra'ui lito ve'ein lo. Really, says the Gemara, it really is ra'ui to him, but he doesn't end up taking it. Why not? Because there's no raya. He doesn't end up taking it. It's a theoretical halacha, which is that he should be able to take something, but he can't prove anything. Because he can't prove anything, he takes nothing. In other words, the diuk from our Mishnah is not a good diuk. Ay v'hatanya harezim ishtalim al katan min gadol ule gadol min katan, that there should be some kind of payment at all. Let him take at least a little bit. Says the Gemara, what is that Mishnah talking about when he takes something and gets to keep it? That's the tafas. That's when he took it when he shouldn't have. You're not allowed to do that. If you take it, you can keep it, but it's really not the right way to do things. And similarly, it's not 4 lines from the bottom. Haya echad tam ve'echad muad Hanizak omer muad hizik es hagadol. The nizak I want to collect more, so I say the muad is the one who caused damages, and vitam es hakatan, and your animal that was docile was the one that damaged my smaller animal. The amazik omer loki elatam es hagadol muad es hakatan. We said in our Mishnah, hamotzi mechaber levaraya, that nothing changes hands because lemaisa there's no proof. So the Gemara said here too, we make the same diuk as before, same line of questioning, just a different source. Hello, my siraya. Shakil kidik amar mazik. It implies from our Mishnah that if you don't have a raya, okay, nebach you're not going to get the full collection from what you the nizak think, but perhaps the mazik's payment can still come through. So says the Gemara, that diuk, what do we do with that? That's against the Mishnah. We learn that by chitin and seorin that you don't even get the seorin. So why would the diuk say you get the payment of the mazik? As we turn to the top of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Ro'ui litol ve'enlo. Yeah, theoretically he could collect if he could bring a proof, but without a proof, he's not able to collect. There are times when those payments do go through. Says the Gemara, that's only the tafas when you take it without permission. Otherwise, you're really not allowed to. Let's move quickly. We have 1 minute left. That was a case that we learned in our Mishnah, that if Yitz owned both animals that damaged my animal, both there's the plural language of chayavin. Amar le Rava mi parzika le Ravashi. Shma mina shvarim tamin. This implies a docile animal shehiziku ratzamizeh gove. It implies that I can collect from any docile animals that have damages. We must be dealing with bemuadin, with animals that are already known to damage. Says the Gemara, bemuadin, if the animals are known to damage ema seifa, then what about one of the later cases in the Mishnah, 7 lines down? In that case, we are talking about hamotzi mechaber al varaya, but bemuadin, my nafkale mina. Who cares what you claim about the animal? If it's muad, the guy has to pay nezek shalem no matter what. So d'mei Torah me'alya ba'ilishlume. He has to pay anyways. Nothing changes. Amar le, you're right. Seifa b'tamin v'reisha b'muadin. And the Gemara concludes that the seifa is dealing with a tam, a docile animal, and the reisha is taka dealing with a muad. And this was the question that Michael asked. Amar le Rav Acha Saba le Rav Ashi. Ibemuadin chayavim. Why the plural language? Chayiv gavra mi baile. It should be that the owner is the one who's held accountable. Beautifully asked. And furthermore, my shneihem chayavin. Why did you say shneim? Who's 2 people? Elala olam betamin. Really, we're talking about animals that are docile. The Rabbi Akiva hidamar shutfeninhu chayavin. The 2 of them, they're partners. That's how we explained Rabbi Akiva many days ago. The time, but the isnu l'tar vayu delo matzi marchile, because there's 2 people, they can't cancel out each other. One of their animals most definitely killed. Aval lesnu l'tar vayu. If there's only one person, then matzi amar le zil isi raya. You need to go find another proof, the high Torah, that my animal az kach v'ashalim lo. But when there's only one person, what? Then you can get out of it. With 2 people, then both of you, somebody has to pay. We'll stop right here. Hadron alach hamaniach baruch Hashem. We finished the 3rd parak of Maseches Bava Kama. You're also come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Wishing you all a beautiful night.